Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, the ReliefFactor.com studio inside of a warming up beltway in time for the March for Life. I'm joined by United States Senator Ted Cruz from the great state of Texas. He has launched, by the way, a brand new podcast, which is, I think, so relevant for this period of impeachment. It's called VerdictPodcast.com. The first two episodes are up at VerdictPodcast.com. Senator Cruz, welcome. I don't like competition. I really don't, but I'm glad you're doing this, just provided you don't do it much.
Well, thank you, Hugh, and it's great to be with you, and you do a great service each and every day that I'm glad for, and these are crazy times, and understanding in them is not easy right now.
How often are you going to do this podcast, and when are you doing it? I'm just always curious about the practicalities of broadcast. When are you laying down the tape?
So I'm doing the podcast each and every day during the impeachment trial, right after the trial ends. So I leave the Capitol and jump in a truck and head over to the studio. And we usually record it within the hour, and
that is
get it
really
get
terrific.
It up a couple hours later.
You know, that's contemporaneous account that will matter should this country ever have to go through this again. Well done, Senator. Now, big question: what is, in your opinion, in the best interest of the Republic? And I don't mean just in the next 100 hours or 100 days or months, even, but in the next 100 years. What, if we are thinking in that time frame, is in the best interest of the Republic to happen next?
Well, in terms of finishing the trial, let's just best interest of the Republic is a broad enough question. Let's focus on just the impeachment trial right now. In terms of finishing the trial, we've got one more day of arguments from the House managers. So we will sit there all day today and listen to them argue. I suspect they'll make many of the same arguments over and over again, because we've seen that now for several days in a row. And then starting Saturday, the president's defense team, for the first time, gets to stand up and present their defense of the president. That'll start Saturday and continue through Monday. Once the opening arguments are done, we will then move to questions from senators, 16 hours of questions from senators. Now, the way it works is we don't get to ask questions directly. Instead, we handwrite them, and the Chief Justice John Roberts, will ask the questions for us.
Now, does that alternate from the majority to the minority? Does it alternate by seniority among the majority and the minority?
So it's not seniority within the two parties. It alternates Democrat and Republican, but it has typically been the majority leader and the Democratic leader decide the order of the questions. So you submit them, but it's not straight seniority. Now,
will you print yours, Senator, or will you use script?
You know, that is a good question, and I'll confess I don't know the answer to that. With the Clinton impeachment trial, they followed the same proceedings, and they had a form that looked like you had to write them out. I've got a number that I have typed, and I'm continuing to type them, but I'm not sure which way it'll work. I hope you can type them. It makes for a more effective questioning. And by the way, one of the things I've invited people to do on the podcast that I'm doing every night is I've said, listen, if any of your listeners have ideas for questions that you would like me to ask, you just tweet them at me. My Twitter handle is @TedCruz, and just put the hashtag verdict. And we are reviewing all of those questions and trying to get good ideas for pithy, effective, meaningful questions to ask of the House managers.
Well, here is my request that you consider. Footnote 565, in which the president's lawyers in their brief for the president cite contemporaneous account from Politico as to Ukrainian meddling. Now, I've described this as going to hurt as a Texas senator, and I apologize in advance. The Russians were the Houston Astros of cheating in 2016. They were really the champions. But the Ukrainians were still the Mahoning Valley Scrappers, a double-A club, and they were playing in this. And therefore, given the contemporaneous accounts, the president's full panoply of powers are engaged. Is he within his rights to inquire as to whether or not it's Burisma or CrowdStrike? I believe the former is relevant, not the latter, but is it within his rights as president to do so?
Absolutely, yes. Sadly enough, the footnote you cite, I'm familiar with. I'm familiar with that Politico article. I've read that Politico article that came out that detailed at great length the multiple efforts that Ukraine did to interfere in the 2016 election, to to weigh in on behalf of Hillary Clinton. Now, they didn't engage in the sort of conduct that Russia did, which means
Agreed.
they didn't have bot farms. They weren't hacking it electronically, but they had multiple players throughout their government that were vocally, aggressively advocating for Hillary Clinton and attacking Donald Trump in a way that is extremely unusual. And it is perfectly legitimate for a president to press for an investigation as to foreign countries and why they're interfering in our elections, which is what the president did. And then when it comes to Burisma, the most important question in this entire trial, and the reason why at the end of the trial the president is going to be acquitted, is can a president investigate corruption? And the answer is obviously yes. And in fact, if there's serious evidence of corruption, the president not only has an ability to investigate, a responsibility to do so. When it comes to Burisma, Burisma is the largest natural gas company in Ukraine. It was owned and controlled by a Ukrainian oligarch who made billions doing this. It was corrupt through and through. And Burisma had on its board Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden. It was paying him $1 million a year. And Joe Biden was the Obama administration's point person for Ukraine policy, and he vigorously advocated, he pressured Ukraine to fire the prosecutor that was investigating and targeting Burisma and the oligarch who had made billions. And he did all of this while his son was making $1 million a year. Now, whether that is in fact corrupt or not, I don't know, but it's it's enormous evidence to justify investigating to make whether it's corrupt, and that's what President Trump asked the Ukrainians to do, and that was within his authority and responsibility to do.
Now, our friend Jonah Goldberg says, Hugh, don't, and he would say, Senator Cruz, don't overlook, he brought up CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is a discredited conspiracy theory. I believe the CrowdStrike theory is discredited, but that does not disable the president from throwing out whatever he wants to throw out, provided that there is a predicate for Ukrainian corruption. It will be disproven eventually by others that CrowdStrike is not the way to go, but Burisma is legitimate. Do you think that there is any honesty on the other side to recognize the presidential power in this with this predicate?
So there isn't, but I also think the House managers made a serious tactical mistake. I think yesterday was very consequential because what they've done is they've opened the door to Burisma, they've opened the door to Hunter Biden testifying, and the reason for that is they have built their whole case on the proposition that they argued at length yesterday, that there is zero basis for any reason to investigate Burisma, that it is completely fake and phony and bogus and without merit. That's their argument, that the only possible reason to investigate Burisma is illegitimate political motives. That's simply not the case. You know, we were talking a minute ago about the podcast that I've launched, Verdict with Ted Cruz. Last night, the entire show, we did a half-hour show where the entire topic was Burisma, and I walked through in real detail. Here is all of the evidence of Burisma corruption that would justify any president saying we need to investigate. I walked through the timeline and the facts, and so let me encourage your listeners to go and subscribe to Verdict with Ted Cruz. Sign up, give it 5-star ratings. You know, it's a little crazy here. We launched it 3 days ago. It is already one of the top 10 podcasts in the world.
Wouldn't you wish that Andrew Johnson's impeachment jurors had a chance to podcast during that? It would be useful. It will be useful 100 years from now. 3 quick questions.
Well, I think I might have launched a Pigeon Express communication service during the Andrew Johnson.
That's true, but I would have loved contemporaneous accounts from jurors. Senator, what recommendation do you have to the president's lawyers about tone? I hope they adopt the more in sorrow than in anger. I actually hope they give more time back to the court, but they do not repeat the Nadler slanders of the body to which he is presenting, or the Adam Schiff misuse of Hamilton's letter to George Washington, which Dean Matt Spaulding just explained to us. I just want them to stay in their lane. What's your recommendation to them as a juror?
So I agree with you on that. I actually spent a fair amount of time last night after the trial talking with the president's lawyers and urging them, number one, focus on substance more and process less. Don't. There are all sorts of process concerns. Those are real. As lawyers, it's easy to focus on them. Focus on what matters, which is the substance. Lay out the case why President Trump is innocent. And the reason he is innocent, and I told them, look, nothing matters more than the facts on Burisma. Yesterday, the House manager spent over an hour arguing there's no reason to investigate Burisma. They built their entire case on this house of cards, lay out the substantive factual reasons why investigating Burisma. The president had a responsibility to do so, and I also urge them, exactly as you said, to be calm, to be matter of fact, not to be emotional, not to be histrionic, simply to lay out the case. It is, from their perspective, it's a jury trial in the sense of laying out the argument to the American people, but it also, there is an element in which it is a Supreme Court argument. You know, years ago when John Roberts was the best Supreme Court advocate of his generation, and I know him well and saw him argue many cases, he always argued calmly, methodically, and someone asked him why he did that, and he said, well, I don't get emotional because it doesn't work. If getting emotional worked, I would do it, but that's not what we need. I think that's good advice for the House.
I hope they listen to you. Now, a quick question, because we can't anticipate whether witnesses will be called until after we hear this. I want to ask you about presidential power and coronavirus, and we have a minute, Senator. The Chinese authorities are trying to shut down an entire country, 14 cities. It's spreading rapidly. There's one case in the United States. There's no cause for panic. I've been assured by senior officials at the White House there are plans, et cetera. But what are the presidential powers in the event that, in fact, a pandemic of any sort now or in the future come to the United States?
Well, I'll tell you, I have received similar assurances. We have a briefing scheduled this morning on the details of the virus and the potential threats. But in the case of a pandemic, there are substantial emergency powers, and when it comes to a potential epidemic in terms of quarantining individuals, quarantining travelers, trying to prevent the spread, trying to set up hospitals to treat the United States, we have some capability to do it, but thank God we have never faced a massive pandemic, and there's no doubt it would stress both our legal institutions and our healthcare institutions. And so preventing it from coming in on the front end is by far the best way to do it.
And not damaging the presidency's powers or the institution of it concurrent with the outbreak of one in China would also, I think, be foremost in people's minds. Senator Ted Cruz, thank you. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Senator.
Thank you, my friend. God bless.
Thank you.
God bless.